So good to be here, brother, with you in Egypt of all places. What does Egypt mean to you, and what's your understanding of this powerful portal that we've been working in the last couple of weeks?
Well, Egypt carries so many flavors and so many elements, of course. I first came to Egypt back in 2007, 2008, after I was arrested for bringing in some bottles of ayahuasca into Australia. That lasted for a year, and at the end of it, someone said, here's a couple of grand, just to tide you over until you can't get yourself back on your feet. And I thought, how long is that going to last me? A week? So I thought, I'll go to a third world country. And someone had said to me, a psychic had said, you need to go to Egypt because Egypt holds something for you. And she said, you've activated your Baba lives in India and in South America. She said, but Egypt holds something for you. So without any hesitation or further ado, I just jumped on a plane and went there and found a little pension in Giza overlooking the Sphinx. Wow. And that's when my relationship with Egypt began. It was extraordinary because I was in Giza and feeling the pyramids and feeling all the antiquities. And it took me a few days before I could really venture into the pyramids because I just felt like I was working up to it. But there is a magic and a mystery here that is, universal but indefinable. I mean, we all know about the magic of Egypt. We've all learned about it at school. But when you get here, no matter how much you've prepared for, you've seen pictures of the pyramids or the Sphinx, you're still not prepared for the actuality of it when you're actually in the presence of these incredible structures. And for me, there's always been a thread with the Middle East for some reason. There's been perhaps from past lives or whatever, but I've always felt a real affinity to the Middle Eastern ethic, their aesthetic, their food, their religious Sufism, the mystery schools of Egypt, and also of Sumeria and the Mithraic mystery schools in Persia have always fascinated me. So I've always done a in-depth study of those times. And after that first immersion in Egypt, which was really deep, because I ended up doing a 5-day solo retreat in the White Desert, which is west of Giza, about a day's travel. And that made a deep impression on me.
Were you taking any medicine in that?
No, I wasn't. I was just
Vision quest.
Vision quest,
yeah,
exactly. Nice. Yeah, sometimes it's good to take a break from the medicines, just to sort of like feel the purity of one's own being. Not that the medicine certainly also reveals that, but just to be with nature, just bring it back to absolute simplicity. So I found that to be very, very deep, and it was a very big initiation for me. And after that, Egypt opened up in other ways, and in medicine ways. I've taken groups up the Nile, doing voice activations in each of the temples, and that was amazing. We did that last year, but this year it was more of coming back into the path of the mystery school Acacia thread.
Yeah, beautiful. And you mentioned voice and vocal activations. We had a brief exchange in the King's Chamber at the Great Pyramid. What do you think the role of sound or frequency or that sonic vibration has been, especially maybe around the construction of pyramids and things? What's your
I think absolutely intimately involved. I think that they took into consideration, the builders took into consideration not only the mathematical exactitude with it exactly being on north, and the dimensions relating to the distance between the Earth and the Sun and the Earth and the Moon and so on and so forth. I absolutely believe that that the King's Chamber in particular was a portal for sonic activation. It was an initiation chamber. I really felt that. The very first time I went there, going back to that first trip in Egypt, when I did decide to go into the pyramid, I went up through the grand hall, the grand gallery, into the King's Chamber, which you have to bend down under that thing. It's kind of like a way of humbling yourself, And I went in there, and it was full of Japanese tourists. And I thought, oh shit, I'd kind of had this fantasy that it would be me in the chamber.
I had that fantasy on our trip.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, it wasn't like that. So I just sat in a corner and I started toning the deep Tibetan throat singing just to see how the sound would go. And it was literally like throwing your voice. It was amazing. But the interesting thing was that the Japanese tourists went and they split.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they realised that it was me making the sound.
Yeah.
And then I had the whole place to myself. You know, and I was just toning, sounding, harmonically penetrating those huge piezoelectric 70-ton pieces of granite.
And for those, just on that, for those that are listening who haven't been in the King's Chamber, like everything's precisely cut, isn't it?
So precise. Now, the largest stones that they utilise in the entire pyramid, they're up to 70 to 100 tons, whereas the average stone to build a pyramid was about 20 tons. And they're granite, piezoelectric granite,
and they're
very
inside the pyramids. So it's like, you know, how...
At the very heart. So it was extraordinary then. And then, after I was there for about 10 minutes making these sounds, in walk 6 other people who immediately start harmonically throat singing.
Wow.
It's so rare to meet people who do harmonic throat singing in any case, but then in the King's Chamber, on that day, in that moment, and so together we did this amazing sound activation, just the 7 of us, and at the end of it we were so deeply moved in a transpersonal way. It seemed absolutely trivial and paltry to like exchange names or you know, how are you, where are you from sort of thing. All we could do was just namaste and bow and walk away. That was it. So I don't know who those people were to this day, and it's not necessary to know, but what we did that day together was amazing, incredible. Beautiful. And then to follow up with that, last year when I came to, took a group up the Nile from Aswan, up the river, stopping off at all the temples, in particular Luxor, which is an amazing place, the place where Karnak Temple is. Then we eventually were able to get the pyramid for 3 hours of private viewing from 11 o'clock at night to 2 a.m. in the morning.
Incredible.
And so we were, once again, I found myself in the King's Chamber with a group of friends where we were able to harmonically sound and activate that room, and everybody felt that, you know, and we were so activated afterwards. You couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. It was just so
interestingly, I have a friend here in Egypt at the moment, and their retreat group did just that 2 nights ago, and that was what they described, was they felt so open and activated, not being able to sleep, just feeling, you know,
you're like
so
a giant
alive.
toroidal kind of like there's just energy
Taurus.
coming up. It's the Taurus. It's just flowing around, and you can literally physically feel it. You know, it's incredible, so powerful.
That's just without consuming any medicine for the people listening. It's purely through vocal activation.
That's right, and the utilization of those energies that are really specific and unique to the King's Chamber in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid.
Awesome. And so, based on that, you know, where we find ourselves at the moment as a humanity, being here in Egypt, you know, you and I, our group. For me, it was really about that truth-speaking, voice activation, you know, tapping into that frequency of our music, of our medicine. But what's your interpretation? You know, we talk about the precession of the equinoxes and the turning over of the time periods, and, you know, why is Darpan here in Egypt at this point, and what do you think we're working towards or working on?
Well, certainly, you know, I follow the flow of synchronicity. I just follow where the magic thread goes. And it's not really that I choose to be here, but I find myself here by invitation. And then I start to go, well, wow, there's what's there here for me. And I feel that in these times, which are very potent, very full of potential, these times that we live in, of great upheaval and chaos and also, you know, like reconstructions, dissolution and the emergence of a new ethic and paradigm. And I think that it's necessary that it's so chaotic, the planet today, because transformation doesn't happen easily in a place where everything is set and ordered and we know what everything is. And, you know, when things are uncertain, when things are thrown up in the air, when things are shaken up, this is very good for transformation. So I think that being in Egypt at this time, because of these portals that already exist, there's stargates on this land, and also the portals that are represented by the pyramid, or the pyramids, is a very potent place to be, because my feeling, no one really knows. I mean, there's lots of theories as to who built the pyramids, what their purpose were, what their function was, etc. But my feeling is that that the pyramids were a multi-purpose construct. You know, Tesla thought that they were a power plant. I totally agree. He built his Tesla tower on the same principles that the pyramid was built. But I think they are also there as a kind of a time calendar, letting us know that there are certain cycles that the Earth goes through. And one of these cycles that you mentioned, the precessional cycle, which happens every 25,800 years, just as the Earth moves around the Sun, so the entire solar system moves around a central sun in our galaxy called Alcyone, which is in the Pleiades. And so as we go through this peregrination, which corresponds to the wobble in the Earth that we have, and we pass through all these different astrological signs, like we're just coming out of Pisces, coming into Aquarius, the completion, they say that halfway through that cycle,
about
12,000 years ago, at that point there's often great change, earthly changes. And of course what happened 12,000 years ago was the whole Younger Dryas period, the whole ice age that came through.
Great flood.
And now we're coming to the end of that. So we're coming to the end of this great cycle, which Plato called the Great Year, or the Great Year. Talking about this 25,800 year cycle. And as we come to the conclusion of that, there is usually major events that happen both physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, for all beings on this planet. And I think that we are already experiencing that. We're in that portal, we're in that bottleneck already, which is kind of a death and a rebirth, which is the age-old perennial cycle of nature, that all things that live die, and from every death comes a rebirth. So I think that we're in one of those stages, and that these places, these timeless structures such as the pyramids and the Sphinx, are coming back into focus to remind us that they've been here, they've seen these cycles before, and that somehow the ancients perhaps even built them to remind us that these cycles are here, because often in our historical process we forget. And it is usually very profound change, big earth changes, psychological, spiritual changes. And I think that we're on the cusp of one of those massive leaps. And I think that Osho once said that every 25,800 years it's possible for a significant percentage of human beings to make that leap in consciousness into like a quantum shift, a quantum leap into another state of consciousness.
Another epoch.
Yeah, another way of being. And so it's a growth, it's an evolutionary push that we're part of. And so I think they say that there's the hall of inscriptions below the pyramids. There are massive halls which are not
and the Sphinx
available to the public. And they say that in the hall of inscriptions there is detailed information about the cyclical changes that the earth goes through, and that we're in one of those right now. It's not available for public. Certainly Egyptologists know, some of them know about it, but many of them won't talk about it. But they've done those, photographs into the earth, and they can see there's massive chambers underneath.
Well, it's interesting what you were saying, Darpan, about, we're being called to these different planetary portals. Like, something that I love is the Gene Keys, and Richard Rudd talks about the 9 planetary portals of initiation. Do you think, as our consciousness is waking up, that's potentially why, we're called to Peru, to Machu Picchu and that area. We're called to Teotihuacan and Mexico, and we're called to Glastonbury and the Stonehenge, and we're called to Egypt. Like, there potentially is these 9 areas that are there to remind us.
Undoubtedly, I think so. I remember in 1987 when Jose Arguelles, who was the one who brought the dream spell of the Mayan calendar into focus in the Western psyche, he called the first world meditation. It was a world meditation to come together at all places like portals of great beauty and power, nature. So people were gathering at Mount Shasta, at Everest, at Uluru, us in Byron Bay, we gathered at the head of the Dragon Line, which comes out at Little Watergoes Beach,
Yep.
from Wollumben down to Little Watergoes Beach. And so people were gathering at all these power sites all over the world, Glastonbury, at all the places you mentioned. And we were all synchronizing to one meditation, one global meditation. It was the first one of its kind. And it was very potent, very powerful. It was palpable. You could feel it. And what I felt was happening was there was a light, awakening and lighting up a grid of light around the planet. It was the first global awareness of, hey, we're together on this beautiful Mother Earth, and awakening that notion of Mother Gaia, that we are all connected, and that just as we have a body and all the meridians connect all the acupuncture points, so does the Earth, through the dragon lines, through the energy portals, through the stargates that exist on the planet, and that by activating them with awareness, that we were in fact triggering and indeed activating this kind of energetic field that is surrounding Gaia, and that we are part of that. We're not separate, we're actually part of that. And so it was a beautiful first global acknowledgement of the Mother, of one being, one Earth, one people, one entity. And since then we've had many of those activations, global meditations. And I feel that that's what the purpose is for us to become conscious of it through these meditations, through these activations. And in becoming conscious of it, we wax it, we amp it out. It's like Alan Watts once said, the more that you notice that you're plugged in, the more plugged in you get. And so awareness is the key. Awareness of what we are, who we are, and how we're operating on this planet actually amplifies and awakens and activates that sense of oneness, sense of
one
oneness,
consciousness, really.
Yeah, one
and that's an
consciousness.
awesome segue, because one of the areas I wanted to touch on was the Serapeum that we went and visited near Saqqara Temple here in Egypt. And it's basically, from my interpretation, like a network or a grid of sarcophagi, these large stone sarcophagi that, you know, Scientologists, Egyptologists say they were used to mummify bulls. And depending who you listen to, Billy Carson's somebody that I love. He says the only bullish thing about it is it's bullshit that they used it for bulls. But quite, you know, obviously based off what you were saying with one consciousness, and that all of these portals and sacred sites were really potentially about expanding our consciousness, awakening our consciousness, like working with the unified field, the quantum field. And the Serapeum, you know, could be somewhere that they were working with consciousness. So, you know, what's your interpretation? We've talked about it.
Well, it's hard for me to imagine, just on a personal level, that they spent so much time and energy carving these massive
perfectly
sarcophagi, perfect, chiseled, like black granite, the hardest granite you can imagine, and so beautifully done, highly polished. Just the lid of the sarcophagus weighs something like 50 tons. You know, the whole thing weighs outrageously, it's so heavy.
Yeah.
And then it beggars the question, how did they get those structures inside? Did they carve them inside? Is it a little bit like the ship in the bottle or the goose in the bottle? How did it get in there? How do you get it out? You know, it's a great mystery, but it's hard for me to imagine this was done solely just for the local deities of the bulls. Now, I might be wrong. You know, Egyptologists will say, no, that's exactly what it was used for. And there was indeed near Alexandria a temple to Serapis. There's no doubt that they worshipped the bull, as most the Mithraic systems of Persia. That was like that was a practice that was prevalent in the Middle East. But there's a deeper element, and that is that, you know, we'd have to open up a whole conversation here about Sumeria and about Anunnaki gods, and that Thoth and Osiris and all of the gods and goddesses of Egypt were actually advanced beings who were rendered and treated as gods, but were actually a very advanced race who were here on Earth looking for mining gold. But that's a whole other story. However, when one sees these sarcophagi, it certainly appears like they're made for a very tall person. They're very, very long, and they said the Anunnaki were about 12 to 14 foot high. You can see it in the steles, the drawings of the ancient Sumerians, where one of the gods, the Anunnaki, is sitting in a chair like this, handing out the plow and various instruments, technologies to assist the human beings. The human beings are standing at this level and they're sitting down. So if they were to stand up like this, they would tower over the humans. And so when you see these sarcophagi,
you can see that in a lot of the hieroglyphics and designs on the temples.
That's right,
here.
indeed. And so this sarcophagus is not shaped like a bull to hold a bull. You'd have to cut the bull up in order to fit it in there. But certainly it's the shape of...
And where were the bulls?
Of a tall human being.
We asked the guides in there.
Yeah, that's right.
And the bulls are in the museum. And there was no bulls in the museum.
So I think it's a bit of a flimsy theory, and it is just that, a theory. No one knows. So that's the best theory they can come up with. I think there's a deeper reality, and I think that it points to a deeper understanding of the origins of the human race, and it points to a deeper relationship that the human race has had with beings that have, basically guided human beings into various civilization. Because in, say, the early Sumerian texts, when, as I said, the gods were giving the plow, writing, cuneiform, astrology, astronomy, all of these awarenesses to the human beings, they were saying that, the gods gave us that. We didn't come up with mathematics. The gods gave us the system of mathematics based upon 12 and the law of 9. And so, they're very specific and very clear about that. You say, slowly over time we came up with it. They said, no, we were directly given these technologies, these tools. And so these are some of the oldest writings known to man, like 5,000, 6,000 years old. And so one would, think that you could trust the writings of these people, that they were telling the truth. Why would they be telling big Furbies, big lies, just to fool the people in the 21st century, have a joke? I think they were being very sincere and very serious, and we need to take that seriously. Now, someone like Zecharia Sitchin has done that. He copped a lot of flack because, a lot of his contemporaries and peers say, oh no, it's all mythological, it's all legends, they weren't actually real people. But to all intents and purposes, when you go back to the texts, when you speak about the accounts, even in the Old Testament, when Moses sends an advanced sort of reconnaissance party into the land of milk and honey, Judea, while they're still wandering in the Sinai desert, that they come back and they say, there's still a few of the Anak living there, and the Anak was their word for Anunnaki. And they're very tall, and maybe there were some hybrids, even like Goliath may have been hybrid half Anunnaki, because they were from very tall giants around in those days. And so it's, again, open for conjecture, but certainly worth the research. And I think that at this time in our evolutionary push, all of this information is coming forth. It's coming to the surface. Whereas previously it's been pretty heavily guarded within the halls and annals of the secret mystery schools and secret societies. But this information is slowly now becoming available to everybody as we become more and more cognizant and aware of our true beginnings, our source as human beings.
Yes, and I want to maintain the sacred here, and I'll leave it up to you, Darpan, to guide the next question, just around the epic, beautiful, divine, transmissions we received as a part of our experience here. Speaking into maybe what some of the secrets or the things the Egyptian Mystery School were really practicing that are starting to become available to the, we'll call us the mortals, the general public, that we've been receiving, and what some of these medicines were and the purpose they served here in Egypt. That you can share.
That's the doorway to a great mystery. The ancient mystery schools from Sumeria began in Sumeria, was then taken on to Egypt, and from Egypt it went to Persia and to Greece. Of course, I missed the Indus Valley. From Sumeria it first went to the Indus Valley, which was part of the These are all, again, were Anunnaki settlements, Indus Valley, Sumeria, later Egypt, where these mysteries were imparted, and they were mysteries that at the very center of them involved a sacrament,
which is still a mystery.
Yeah,
as we know.
And that sacrament is embodied or enshrined or symbolized by the symbol of Osiris, who was the god of gods. He was the one that was guarding the doorway between life and death. And he was the symbol for Osiris as the acacia tree. And that has been brought down to modern times, even into Freemasonry, where they use the symbol of the acacia prolifically in their writings and in their records, because they do trace their lineage back into Egypt, albeit a watered down version. But if you come directly into Egypt and the mysteries of Osiris, they were utilizing inside the mysteries a sacrament that we believe to be the acacia tree, which is the source of great teaching, wisdom, enlightenment, if you like. It carries the light. The acacia tree has been sacred to so many traditions. Even in the Jewish tradition, when you go into the temple of the Holy of Holies, the very central tabernacle is made from the wood of shittim, which is the acacia tree. And acacia has been coming up throughout Middle Eastern mysticism in virtually every country, and certainly also, as we know, in Australia with the Australian Aboriginals. We talk about ayahuasca coming from South America and that it has its roots there. Well, indeed it does, the jungle version thereof. But there were analogues of that same medicine being made in so many other different countries, and in particular in the Middle East, from the acacia tree and another beautiful mother plant called Peganum hamala, which is sometimes referred to as haoma. And even in the ancient Avesta, which is another 6,000-year-old document that comes from Iraq, there's the Mesopotamian kind of lineage or history, they were using haoma as an awakener, as a source of inspiration, as a source of wisdom, as a source of communing with the divine. That's clearly mentioned there. And the Zoroastrian, or the ones who follow Zarathustra, continued this tradition, and somewhere along the line the priests took over the hierarchy of the religion, and then the Haoma became more a symbolic thing that they did, and suddenly belief systems, practices, sutras, holy scriptures took the place of direct experience with the divine, and so the priests became the interlocutors between the divine and the people. And so slowly this sacrament was lost, or it receded into the mystery schools, where it was more occult, and occult means hidden. So it was hidden from the main populace. But this was an unbroken line that went down all the way through, in all the great mystery schools, the Eleusinian mystery schools, the Mithraic mystery schools, as mentioned earlier, the Egyptian mystery schools, the Indus Valley, where this was through thousands of years of history.
It's also hypothetically where the Australian Aboriginal were ringbarked. And
that's right.
They lost that.
That's true. Even early, because the Australian Aboriginals have certain correspondences to the Middle East and also to Tibet in their cosmology, because when the land masses were all joined, they migrated down through in Gondwana, and then when the land masses separated, they were separated into their own kind of stream of evolution. But I think that's an older story. But what we're looking at in the Middle East is the last 6,000-7,000 years, perhaps since the last, younger
dryas.
Exactly, that's right. So these sacraments are divine and are just re-emerging to take their rightful place in the collective consciousness of human beings globally. As I said, all this information, which is arcane knowledge, which has up until this time been hidden in the mystery schools, it's occult knowledge, is coming to the surface and is becoming available to everyone. Because what is happening now at this point is it's no longer just privy to certain invited or elected human beings, special human beings who are initiated into this. Now it is available to any sincere seeker who is really sincere from their heart, looking for guidance and inspiration and wisdom and completion through these plants. It's becoming available because this is the time of the great liberation. It's not just liberation of our consciousness, but liberation of all of these technologies into the general collective. And that's what makes this time that we're living in, a very special, very incredible time to be alive.
Yes.
Because as we see these things coming back, and it coincides with the return and the rise of the feminine, because these sacraments are basically feminine in nature, in that they dissolve boundaries. They kind of relax the grip of the ego or the persona that it's had upon our awareness, and so it's bringing us back home. It's almost like to take the mythological kind of like ancestry that we were booted out of the Garden of Eden by a jealous and fearful God who said, "Do not eat that tree of good and evil, or of knowledge, of tree of life." And now we're being invited back into the garden after having been in the peregrination of being kicked out of the garden, so to speak.
Rejected.
Yeah, now we're being invited back in, which means we're becoming whole again. And we've been on a journey that's been quite alienated, and that's why we've ended up in the kind of Western reality map situation that we're in, which is quite dire. And at any moment we could destroy ourselves and the planet as well. We all know that. But that, ironically enough, is an essential element in the initiation that we all must pass through in this collective death and rebirth that we're already embarked upon. So everything can be used. Even the possibility of imminent annihilation. As in all initiation rites, this is an essential ingredient. One must feel like I could die in order to be transported or transcend the limitations of the belief systems and the conceptual framework of the egoic structure. So it's all good and it's all working towards the same thing. Even those so-called negative aspects of what we experience on the planet with war and the armaments and injustice and abuse and all the things we see around us are all working towards this transformation. All will be resolved into one. And this is the beautiful irony of the situation, is that the devil knows not for whom he works. It's all working towards the same, because we're coming to a great shifting of cosmic wheels in these times. And the intellect cannot judge what's going on, because we just need to take every step by step, carefully measured, just in trust, in absolute trust, without trying to project into the future exactly what's happening. Because what is happening is unprecedented in our historical process, and therefore is a mystery, and we just need to walk and trust in our own innate wholeness, and that by practicing, as the Buddha said, be a light unto yourself, that this will light our way step by step through the valley of death. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, the Lord is my shepherd. Hence the King David psalm, as it goes in the Jewish thing. It's just about that. Just trust in the divine, because what is happening is a miracle. It's a metamorphosis. It's transformation on a level that is hard for us to understand at this side of the fence.
Wow, bro. There was so many things there that I was like, I'm going to go with that thread, no, that thread, no, that thread. Was like, Osho was one of your great teachers. I'd love to come back to Osho, and I'd love to come back to Don Jose Campos and Carioca, those three. So just planting those seeds. But what you just mentioned, I'd really like to go towards the music, because music's been a huge part of your life. I think most people listening know that you've been a dedicated devotee to the medicine path and the plant medicines and the service with ayahuasca and acacia and the others. So I'd love to come more to the music, where that's always been a part of your life even before the plant medicines. How is music assisting in this great change, this great turning over, and how is music?
Music is probably the most powerful tool as an agent for the transformation of consciousness. I realized that at a very young age. I'm completely self-taught. I've never had any lessons as a musician, of music. It's just, for me, I always saw it as a tool. It wasn't just an entertainment. It was something, it was a tool that you could use to shift energy, to change consciousness, to be able to invoke feelings, invoke atmospheres that are beneficial and healing for people. And my early career started off in, rock and roll. I was just a rock and roll. I was playing bass in a band when I was 15, 16. And then later on, started to play, when I was at university, I would be playing in bands. It was just for fun, really. It was just having fun. And but eventually became serious and became my career. I was also working as a professional actor. I mean, I did an honours degree at university, but I was also studying theatre studies and acting at that time. And so, I worked in rock and roll, and that was a beautiful arena within which to explore my shadow, to be honest. It was a great way. It was like a psychological tool. It was like a practice in which I could delve deep into my shadow and make something beautiful out of it. Create music that people loved, but there was also somehow healing parts of myself by living out.
We see that in a lot of these great musicians.
Yeah.
Elvis Presley's and
that's right.
Johnny Cash and those.
But
people.
Very careful not to become consumed by it, because it's a very razor's edge that you walk when you play with the shadow. And you start to do that process of individuation. For me, that was a very important part in my process of individuation. But at a certain point, I let it go when I found Osho, because suddenly I was in an ashram where there was musicians from every country, like really beautiful musicians, who were speaking the language of the divine, not just opening up lower chakras and stimulating and, which is fine and totally good, nothing wrong with it. But suddenly it went up a few notches in the frequency level, and suddenly I was using music for meditation, music for healing, music for sound healing, and using, again, it's the most powerful tool. And this is something we've yet to discover about the importance of this in the Egyptian cosmology, the ancient Egyptian cosmology, was the way they utilized sound. Sound for healing, sound as a technology to create anti-gravity fields, perhaps to lift very heavy objects and be able to manipulate them, because sound is an incredible technology. It can be used, as all technologies, for healing, or it can be used for destruction. They've got these neutron bombs now that they can just completely, through sound, destroy everything but leave buildings intact. The ultimate materialist viewpoint of destruction is to leave the materials intact but just kill all the people. And using sound, so it can be used as a destructive force as well as a positive force. So it's a very big responsibility when utilizing these tools. And as I said, with Osho, I was able to explore the way that it could be used to bring people into meditation, like sound into silence. Almost like, when you see a leaf with a drop of water, of dew, and then the dew drops, just as it drops, and then poof, it drops into the pond, where it becomes one again with the whole body of water. One moment it was a drop, a little entity, the next moment it returned to its source, where it was the one. So, in this way, Osho taught us how to use music and sound. And he used to say that sound is next to meditation. Like, sound is the closest you can get to meditation. It brings you to the doorway of meditation. And then from that sound, we drop, like that dewdrop, into silence. And so for me, utilizing sound as a doorway into silence has always been the most powerful way to enter into meditation. Because we're so busy in the West with our mind. There's so much going on up here, through all of the information that we absorb daily through the media and through social media and all the rest of it. We're just inundated, and the mind is busy. Even when we think we're being calm, the mind is going on with its internal dialogue. And so when people sit down and meditate, it's suddenly they come face to face with this mind, which is relentlessly thinking, and I've got this internal dialogue going, that it's hard to meditate. It's hard to drop into just silence where there's no thought, no mind. People in the day of Buddha could do it much more easily because they were much more closer to the earth, much more simple. But these days we need technologies to bring us into that silence. I think that sound is probably the most powerful. Catharsis is another way. Active meditations that allow you to physically create a physical catharsis, and then enter into the doorway of silence. First, we need to unload, empty, like a purge, if you like, and then we can come into that blessed state of silence. And so sound for me is the most powerful tool. And of course, in ayahuasca and in all of these medicines, sound becomes vision. It's synesthesia. It creates a state of synesthesia so that the senses start to merge. And in particular, in the case of these sacraments, sound becomes vision. So sound becomes a tool. The icaros that the shamans sing, or the songs that are played, are less songs than they are tools of invocation to create certain states of consciousness, to invoke certain states of being, and to manifest certain atmospheres, psychic atmosphere within the group. And so, yes, it's an absolutely essential tool. In every shamanic tradition that I know of, whether it be Mongolian, Nepalese, Polynesian, Australian, Aboriginal, you name it, whatever, Native American, they all use sound. All the shamans sing, because sound penetrates into the astral plane, and it brings heaven and earth together as one.
Wow.
So it has a profound effect and influence upon the work that we do. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. You touched on Osho. With the 20 minutes or so that we have, I'd love you to share a little bit about Osho and what's been some of your key learnings from this great teacher, Carioca, and then Don Jose Campos.
Okay. Well, I first met Osho in 1980. Well, in 1985, I came across his books and his writings and videos earlier than that, in the early 80s. But I was very clear that I was not looking for a guru, didn't want to follow anyone else's path. I was very clear that I wanted to, in this lifetime, actualize that realization within myself. Having spent past lives in
I love the quote that you shared actually about if you find the Buddha, kill him.
Yeah, that's right.
On the path.
Well, it's like that, because like when I did finally do a group where I wanted to go deeper with Osho's work, I just became profoundly affected by the meditations, and so I had to go to India to see him, and he just finished doing his world tour, where all the other countries were booting him out one after the other, and he came back to India. 2 days after that, after he returned to India, I was there, and it was just the most profound meeting. I'd never sat in the presence of somebody who was carrying the kind of a frequency that Osho was fully embodied, and it was deep and it was profound. And the moment I sat in front of him, I just burst into tears. It was like coming home. It was like a recognition or a reminder of something that I knew deep, deep, deep in my soul that had been activated and awakened. And it was just pure, what I felt coming from this man was just pure love and acceptance. And sometimes I'd be having to play in front of him, because I was a musician in the ashram, and I'd be sitting 2 or 3 rows in front, and he'd walk in as if he was ushered in by angels, and the sheer beauty and the sheer tenderness of that, just him walking into the room, I just burst into tears. And I don't burst into tears easily. I'm not a person who cries easily. And he would just look at me and laugh and smile, and I'd be sort of bawling away trying to sing, But the man was absolutely an Everest of consciousness, and it's really a well-kept secret for all those who met him in the flesh, so to speak. I mean, he's one of the most controversial mystics that has ever lived, and most people hold generally quite a negative view of Osho, calling him the tantric master, and who just was licentious and allowed things to... This is such a misunderstanding. He was absolutely the real McCoy, coming here to turn the wheel of Dharma, just as the Buddha did 2,500 years ago. But now it's moving it to another level again. And where the Buddha was life negative, because he was a king, a prince, he said he would renounce the world, because that was his path. He had to, being a prince. Osho is more life positive, saying, enjoy all the goodness, all the abundance that the earth has to offer. Just don't be attached. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy everything can be used for meditation. So he had more of a tantric view where all is resolved into one. So that even the sacred, the profane becomes sacred. And all things are sacred. And that all things contain the god or the goddess force. And so this was a kind of a diametrically opposed view, and yet exactly the same view as the Buddha, because both those paths lead to the same place. You can follow the path of renunciation, perfectly good, and was definitely more appropriate for those times. But now it's a time of growing up, of not just saying, I need to renounce that because they're temptations and it's going to lead me astray from the path. Say, I embrace that. I embrace it all because I am not that. But I can enjoy all. So all can be enjoyed. Osho stressed joy, celebration, laughter, life, meditation, music, things that uplift, things that are naturally abundant, things that uplift the spirit and edify the being. These were the things. And so like to have a teacher and a master of that level who was uncompromising, who's absolutely would not compromise from the truth. He didn't have to be diplomatic, he didn't have to be political, he just said the truth. And most people couldn't handle the truth, and so judged him for it. But it was the golden period of my life where I really felt like there was a deep transmission that happened. And you mentioned earlier this thing that I often talk about, where the Buddha, that's Gautama the Buddha 2,500 years ago, said, if you meet the Buddha along the path, kill him. And people are often confused by that statement. But what he meant was that ultimately in your search for realization, for freedom, for liberation, all things gradually fall away. And ultimately, even the master you have to let go of. Even the master for that final step. Because that any attachment will keep you in duality. And so even the mirror of the master, which is just a mirror of oneself, needs to be merged or resolved into the one. And so for me, I always saw that Osho was like this huge oak tree, massive oak tree, under which we, as little saplings, could grow, safe, protected, held, like growing very fast, very good, in a beautiful environment, which is so rich and provided such benefit to each and everyone who lived there, in his garden, in his ashram. But at a certain point when you grew, you kind of went, what's blocking the sun? Something's blocking. Oh, it's this big old oak tree. Right. Cut the tree.
Yeah.
And that was Osho, where I'm sure why he left the body in the end. He just went, I've done what I've done. I've said what I need to say many times over in every possible way. And now I see I am my own worst enemy. Because it's his attachment to us and our attachment to him that was the last little tie to snip. And it was the one that you snip with the greatest of love and the greatest of gratitude for someone who opens the doorway, gives you the tools within which to realize yourself. Because no master can give it to you. All they can do is give you the indication. They can give you the aspiration, and they can give you the confirmation that the path is worthwhile taking. But in the end, the realization happens in one's own inner sanctum. And that's where you discover that the master was always there, that you are him, he is you. It is just one indivisible plenum of consciousness. So for this, I am just eternally grateful to Osho for that gift. And I'm so grateful for the training I received in the ashram, because it prepared me well for the work that I was to do with the plants in the following 30 years, the last 30 years in fact, since he left the body. And having left that, I found the plants started finding me, and I started taking, and I asked Osho, is this a path worth taking? Is this a path with heart? And in one really deep and profound session with myself and the plants, I got absolute confirmation. In fact, I had deep darshan with Osho, where he gave me absolute blessing to follow this path. And not long after that, I came across Carioca from Brazil, who to me was an extension of the work that I was doing with Osho. He had the same Sufi heart, the same beautiful energy of the frequency of the light frequency of abundance, clarity, wisdom. It was embodying all those same principles that I had been inculcated with whilst in my few years in the ashram with Osho. So it was a natural progression, and it was a beautiful doorway into the plants. At the same time, I also met Don Jose Campos, which was a completely different pathway to the plants. It was more the magico-religious belief system of the Peruvian jungle, which was, in his case, the mestizo tradition of curanderismo. So I learnt all of the path of curanderismo, how to heal, how to work with that frequency and that energy. At the same time, I was working with Carioca, who came from a different stream. He came from the Santo Daime, which was sort of a syncretic Christian animism mix of belief system that Maestro Ireneo started in the early 20th century. It's kind of a church, if you like. But Carioca brought his own flavor to it and brought his own line to it. It was less strict at the Santo Daime, and plus it was much more infused with the Sufi heart, the Sufi spirit. And he and I became absolutely firm friends. It was complete, resonance and union, and I'll also forever be grateful to Carioca. And Jose taught me more about the depth of ayahuasca. He taught me more about dieta, about using the plants for healing, about using the plants for transformation, about it was more like a shamanic university, which is what a dieta is. And the dieta, you diet these master plants, which they call palos. So they're like the barks of trees that give you they become your allies. My first one was Bobinsana, which cleanses the emotional body, and it gives you lucid dreaming during the transmission, and opens you up in so many different ways. And later on I did Lupunita and so many different plants that I dieted, and that became part of the depth of how ayahuasca can be used for really deep psychodynamic healing. Which with Carioca it was more like celebration of working with the community, of opening up the one heart. Whereas with Jose it was more like opening up this chakra, going into deep visionary state, and opening up into the astral realms. And so my intention was always to find out everything about ayahuasca. So I worked for some time with the Barquinia in Acre in Brazil, with the Shua Indian traditions of Ecuador, the guy called Don Casimiro Mamayapta. I learned the ways of Jurema from Yatra Silveira de Barbosa, also from Brazil, Holland. And then just absorbed all of these different lineages and pathways in order to find a way to work with the Western psyche. And the medicine plant said to me early on in the piece, although you are learning all these different traditions, you can honor them all, but you don't need to be bound by any, in the sense that you are working with a Western psyche, which is a very different mindset from the indigenous Native American and South American magico-religious belief systems that are part of their lineage. And certainly that's the reality there. But with the West, we have a different... So the medicine said, hold the medicine in a very held and contained way, observing the universal principles that all the different traditions always embody. And then, once you create a safe and held space for me to work, this is the medicine talking to me, then you can believe whatever you like. If you want to believe in Jesus, Mary and Joseph, you want to believe in the magico-religious systems of the South America, or you want to believe in Zen Buddhism, or you want to believe whatever, I will speak to you in whatever cogent symbolism that you are carrying within your consciousness. And this is really the immersion with ayahuasca, is that you as a deep darshan between the plants and one's own self, one's own deep innermost. And she can read the iconography or the kind of symbolism or the way that you conceptualize reality and your relationship to it in your own unique way. She will speak to whatever is there, because she can get inside your unconscious mind and your conscious mind in a way that nothing else can, no other human being can. And so Carioca used to say, ayahuasca has no face. It takes on the face of the cup that you pour it into. In other words, whatever you bring to it, she will speak to you in that way. And so that's what I did. I just took that advice, took that, and everything unfolded in a really beautiful way. Not my will, but divine will be done. So the plants could use me as a vehicle to transmit into whoever I came into contact with, whoever was coming to the retreats and ceremonies that we were conducting. And over the years, 30 years, we opened up all the way through Europe, all the way from Russia, all the way down to Portugal, and in America. Carioca and I, basically, 25 years ago, were the only ones traveling through Europe. But now, in just such a short time, so many shamans from so many lineages and so many traditions are now walking that path. So it's an incredible thing to witness, to see that unfolding in just that short period of time, 25, 30 years, where suddenly it's become it's been placed on the table in the Western psyche, where everyone is aware of it now, whether they've taken it or not. Whereas back in the day when I started to take it, even my psychonaut friends didn't know what it was. So that's a huge leap on the collective consciousness. And I believe that's what the medicine's come here to do, is to shift consciousness in a very powerful, dynamic, and very extraordinary way.
Amazing, brother. Thank you, bro, for your service and just the courageous work that you've done. Just to summarize or conclude, what's next for Darpan? I love one of the things that you constantly remind me and your family of, which is show me the next step.
That's it.
But for you, I know you're sort of moving into a new season and maybe some new music and things, but
yes.
What's on the cards for you and what's exciting for you?
Okay, great, thanks. Well, as you rightly pointed out, I don't make these decisions. I wait for the next step. And coming here to Egypt was a big step. Connecting with Karim and Ijivana and Odai and Sahar has been quite pivotal.
Yes.
Because I feel like it's the marriage of, now that we're aware of the lineages of South America, now we're bringing the ancient lineages of the Middle East into the story. And I feel like if I can be in a humble bridge for that tradition to come into into awareness on the global stage, then that's something I would do with great surrender and humility. So I feel there's something there. Right now, personally for me, I'm going to do some work with some other brothers, Amani Friend from Liquid Bloom, and Desert Dwellers. We're on a recording project when I get home, as well as with Ben Templestep and also Manish Damour. So that's going to, I haven't recorded for quite some time, so I'm really looking forward to that. Consolidating our community in Byron Bay is also part of it. And for me, the medicine said all those years ago, give this to as many people as possible. And I feel, and already a couple of years now, she's been saying that job has been done.
Yeah.
And it's been done really beautifully and really well. And now she's giving me the inspiration and the direction to speak to a demographic that is growing daily, that will never necessarily find their way into a ceremony room, and yet are still very interested in the transmission of these divine sacraments, these plants. And so she's asking me to step up more into a speaking role, into a role where I can disseminate through music and through talk, speaking, the frequency of these plants. So because it's gradually seeping into larger and larger into the collective. I will always continue to do my retreats at Sachamama, which is our center in Australia, and to work with our friends from Egypt and Jordan. But for the rest of it, I feel like I need to write and record. So that's what's coming up for me, is to just share the journey so far and to open up new pathways into the collective consciousness for people that are, as I say, definitely turning onto the frequency and the transmission of the plants, but who aren't necessarily in the front line or wanting to put their toes in yet.
Yeah.
But it's growing in the collective. I believe we're getting towards critical mass, where these plants and these sacraments will come into their rightful place and become legally ratified in our countries, and that these will be instrumental in the radical shift of consciousness that is already taking place in our lives today.
Fantastic, Darpan. Love you, bro.
Love you, brother. So good to share this experience with him, man.
Absolutely.
Really good.
I'll share Darpan's contact details, website, Spotify, and things in the link for the podcast notes. But just lastly, what do you love about yourself?
What do I love about myself? Well, you know, I just love the fact that I'm alive.
Yeah.
I do. And when I say myself, I could refer to Darpan, the person that we all know, and love. But beyond that, I just love that. I love my courage.
Yes.
I love the fact that I'm able to step into the unknown. And that's one of the things that Osho said when I first met him, said, Darpan, when you face a path that is known and there is a path of unknown, always jump into the unknown. And I can say that as scary as that is sometimes, it has yielded such amazing results because miracles happen when you get out of the way. Mm-hmm. When you're just conducting your life according to how you think it should run, of course you get exactly what you imagine. Mm-hmm. But if you let go into letting the divine decide these things and jump even when you feel fear, miracles can happen. And I'm so grateful for the miracles that have happened in my life. I'm so grateful to the divine. I'm so grateful to my master Osho. And I'm so grateful to all of the teachers who've shown me along this path. And I'm just grateful to all the friends that I'm able to share this with, or this information, because we're all part of one big family. Mm-hmm. And this family is growing, and it's growing because of the courage and willingness that each and every one of us is demonstrating by going against what the herd says, by following one's own intuitive truth, by opening up the heart, by allowing the divine to unfold in our lives, that which is absolutely meant to happen for oneself, and just simply getting out of the way and becoming a humble servant to spirit. And so I guess out of all of the qualities, even though I'm a Taurine and I like to, in certain sense, can be in control of things, what I've learned to do with these medicines and through Osho is to let go of that control. And that has yielded the most amazing results. So that's that kind of courage and willingness I love about myself, that I was willing to do that. And yet that's a reflection of each and every one of you listening, because if you're listening to this, already somewhere in your heart you've expressed that willingness to want to stretch the envelope of consciousness, to want to just inquire beyond the status quo and the kind of consensus reality map with which we have been conditioned. So yeah, thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shaun. Yeah, Aho.